Howard Brown had grown used to people showing him respect and affection at the clinic. Part of it was because he was an outstanding surgeon. Patients wanting to see him had to book an appointment well in advance. Mr. Brown believed that surgery was the most important part of medicine and devoted decades of his life to it. By the age of 45, Howard was a renowned surgeon and had everything a man his age could dream of. He had an expensive car and a luxurious home with a loving wife and son. The determination and hard work he swore by was the reason he had achieved all his success. Few of Howard's colleagues knew that he actually began his career in a little-known clinic on the outskirts of the city. Back then, no one could have even imagined that in just a few years, Howard Brown would become a household name in the world of medicine. Despite his success as a surgeon, Howard never once boasted about his status or the position he held at the clinic. Many of his colleagues believed that he would get promoted to chief of surgery, and that it was only a matter of time. Yes, Howard Brown never paid much attention to such rumors. Instead, he thanked his parents for his success. This surgeon extraordinaire actually grew up in a medical family. His father dedicated his life to therapy, and his mother was a pediatrician. They taught Howard to love medicine and to respect the white coat, which always symbolized patient care. Clearing his mind of those memories, Howard glanced at his watch. He saw that the workday was drawing to an end. "I gotta stop by Larry Martinez's place today. He's been asking me to come see him," the surgeon said out loud as he took off his hospital gown. Larry happened to be one of Howard Brown's patients. 6 months earlier, Howard had performed an extremely complex surgery on Larry, who was barely holding on to life at the time. Most clinics in the area turned Larry down. Howard was the only one willing to take him on as a patient. He understood that it was a rather risky step since it implied incredible responsibility. Fortunately, the surgery was a success. Larry Martinez's life was saved. And now, Larry was planning on properly thanking his savior. Larry raised purebred dogs for a living, and he decided to give a very peculiar gift to his surgeon. When Howard Brown dropped in on his former patient after work, he found himself stuck in the middle of a kennel. Howard was shocked by the number of expensive pets sitting in cages. "Come on in, Mr. Brown. I've got a couple of fine Labrador puppies that you and your family are going to love." "That's the least I could do, of course. After all, if it weren't for you, I wouldn't be standing here today," said Larry, shaking the hand of his distinguished guest. Howard brushed him off in response, making it clear that Larry was giving him too much credit. When the surgeon finally saw the puppies Larry was talking about, his eyes lit up. Howard's son, Kevin, had been begging him for a dog for a very long time, but the family never got around to buying one. To the surgeon's surprise, there turned out to be 3 puppies in a basket. "Take your pick, Mr. Brown. Just don't take the one with the dark spot on his chest," said Larry. "Why not? What's wrong with him?" asked Howard, looking closely at the puppy. "He has a congenital anomaly. One of his hind legs is poorly developed. It's likely that he'll walk with a limp for the rest of his life," Larry Martinez explained with regret in his voice. "I think that's exactly the puppy I'll take," Howard replied, looking fondly at the unfortunate animal. "That's your choice, of course, Mr. Brown, but don't say I didn't warn you," replied the kennel owner. There was sadness and shame in his eyes. In response, Howard simply took the puppy in his arms and, having said goodbye to the kennel owner, went home. Needless to say, when 10-year-old Kevin set his eyes on the new Labrador puppy, his joy knew no bounds. "Thank you, Daddy. I'll name him Buddy," the boy exclaimed and hugged the puppy. Sydney Brown looked lovingly at her husband and smiled with approval. Sydney, Howard's wife, was pleased that her husband hadn't forgotten about their son's request. She was happy to see Kevin in such a good mood. Buddy quickly became a family favorite and was spoiled to no end. Kevin gave Buddy his full, undivided attention 24 hours a day. Larry Martinez's prediction didn't come true, thankfully. As the dog got a little older, his limp went away on its own. Over time, Buddy grew into a white beauty with a broad chest and powerful legs. When Kevin took Buddy out on walks, Howard was confident that Buddy would keep his son out of danger. 2 years passed by quickly. By this time, Buddy had become a full-fledged member of the family, arousing much envy among neighbors and friends. Howard was still working at the clinic and was preparing to take over as chief of surgery. It was pretty much a done deal that Howard would be in charge of the clinic, and he had already gotten used to the thoughts. Unfortunately, not everyone at the clinic was so keen on the idea of Howard Brown becoming their boss. Henry Lewis, for one, was against it. He had been working at the clinic for the past 7 years and was considered to be one of the mediocre surgeons. Rumor had it that Henry took bribes whenever he could and performed black market surgeries within the walls of his own house. Despite these rumors, the cunning surgeon was never caught in the act, which meant that any criticism of him could be considered as baseless slander. Henry Lewis would drive to work every day in a used Chevrolet that should have been scrapped ages ago. What does he do with all his money? He has no family, no kids, gossiped the nurses, making sure not to look the sketchy surgeon in the eye. No one at the clinic knew that Henry's lifelong passion was gambling. It was at the poker table that Henry Lewis spent all his hard-earned savings. Henry never managed to get a hold of himself and stop playing. He only considered the game finished when he had not a single cent left. Even then, he sometimes went further. Without much thought, he borrowed money and couldn't possibly pay it back, and spent it on gambling. Unfortunately, Henry Lewis's creditors weren't the most understanding, law-abiding citizens, and they were used to getting their money back with interest. Put 2 and 2 together, and you understand now why the gambler surgeon had to perform shady surgeries at his house. He'd help all kinds of criminals, and all because he couldn't pay back the money he owed. It was about then that 3 young men entered Henry Lewis's waiting room, looking for trouble. Now hold on just a minute, boys. Let's not be too hasty. I'll get you your money back, Henry mumbled as the uninvited guests appeared in front of him. We're not waiting any longer. If you don't pay back the money today, tomorrow your debt will be doubled. Heck, after tomorrow, we'll make it triple, replied the older of the men. Look, I don't have that kind of money on me right now, but I know who does. My colleague, Howard Brown. He's got a house on Main Street. Rumor has it that Howard's planning on buying a new car, a rather expensive one. That means he has the money. It'll cover the whole debt, and you'll even get much more than what I owe you, Henry blurted out. Hearing these words, the strangers exchanged a couple of brief nods. You could see their eyes sparkling with the anticipation of a quick and easy cash out. After threatening Henry with what would happen to him if he was lying, the criminal trio quickly departed. Howard Brown couldn't have possibly known that his house was being targeted by 3 criminals with a lengthy criminal track record. That evening, the Brown family ate dinner at the big kitchen table, as they usually did. Suddenly, there was a loud banging at the door of the house. Curious as to who it might be, Howard Brown opened the door and found himself face to face with 3 frenzied burglars. Money! Give us the money, Howard. We know everything. Open the safe quickly, and I promise you no one will get hurt, roared one of the robbers. Howard turned pale as a ghost and tried to stammer an objection out. The robbers weren't having any of it, and one of them hit Howard, toppling him over. Then the men made their way to the living room. Right then, a menacing growl could be heard coming from Kevin's room. This wasn't a good sign for the robbers. At first, they didn't even realize what had happened or what animal had attacked them. It was Buddy, of course, who ferociously attacked the robbers and started ripping them to shreds. The dog attacked them so quickly and selflessly that the criminals had no choice but to flee. Before they ran away, though, the older man flashed his knife and stabbed poor Buddy with it. Buddy shrieked in pain, but didn't loosen his grip. He kept fighting. The commotion in the living room gave Sidney Brown enough time to sneak out and call the police. The police arrived just in time and arrested the bloody miscreants right on Howard Brown's doorstep. Howard himself, however, was very busy with an entirely different matter. Crying over Buddy's lifeless body, the man desperately tried to stop the bleeding. Howard's whole world seemed to have stopped at that very moment. Using all of his knowledge, the surgeon was able to stop Buddy's bleeding and apply a tight bandage. Then, taking the dog in his arms, Howard placed him in the back seat of his car and drove him to the vet clinic. The man knew that time was running out and pushed his car to its very limits. Howard burst into the office of the veterinarian on duty, told him what had happened, and said that he was ready to assist him personally. Seeing the tears in the surgeon's eyes, the veterinarian got a clear picture of what was going on and immediately started operating. During the surgery, Howard stood right next to Buddy, who was deep in a medicated sleep. Howard held his paw the entire time. The surgery was successful, and Buddy was saved. Meanwhile, at the police station, the detained robbers confessed to their crime, exposing the criminal surgeon. "I worked side by side with Henry Lewis for so many years, and I never imagined that he would be so cruel," Howard said when interviewed by the local reporters. Buddy's story was soon picked up by a news network, and his name became known far and wide. Letters of support for the four-legged hero came from every corner of the country. Kevin was very happy that things had worked out. Now that Buddy had been discharged from the clinic, the two could continue to play on the front lawn, just like they always did, bringing joy to the parents and the neighbors. Howard and Sydney Brown consider Buddy their guardian angel, and they thank God for sending them such a good boy.